So, with the onslaught of Academy Awards news trending and being very much talked about, I think we're very privileged to have with us the director and producer of the short film Anuja, which is also in the running for Best Live Action Short Film at the Academy Awards. We have filmmaker Adam Graves and producer Guneet Monga Kapoor with us. So, Adam and Guneet, a warm welcome to you both on filmishilmy.com, and thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on the shortlist.
Thank you, Anuj. We really appreciate you having us.
Wonderful. Well, look, Guneet, I mean, I'm gonna begin with you. Look, Anuja is a very interesting topic that you've taken up. I think initially when I heard about it, I was like, okay, is it going to be another poverty-stricken story? Is it going to be another Slumdog Millionaire kind of template of a story? Is it going to be something which is looking at India with a very poverty gaze? But I think after watching the film and reading up a bit about the child labor issue, which is still quite a simmering topic, I think especially in New Delhi, it made a lot of sense as to why you decided to really greenlight this. But I think for you, how important was it, A, to tell this story in a very sensitive way, engaging way, and at the same time not for it to glorify the sort of poverty aspect of it?
So thank you, Anuj. I think this Anuja is really and everything that you said is very important to me as a filmmaker, as a producer, as an Indian filmmaker, and that sensitivity, that lens, is definitely very important in all our storytelling. We've done films like Masan or any of the things that you've seen, which have people from various economic backgrounds. But it's really, really important to have that lens of truth and empowerment. So that I really found in Anuja, and it really touched my heart. And I actually came on board when the film was finished. So it's not something that I greenlit. It's something that I have come full power and guns blazing on, to be able to take it to the world and add all my learnings of years of taking an independent film as far as we can and put a hoarding on the moon, basically. That's what I'm here for, and my journey on the film. Anuja is incredible. The lens that definitely, the lens that this is made with. So yes, it does deal with child labor. It does deal with a certain reality. But what I love about the film and the script is that Anuja is empowered. It's she's empowered. She has her own little superpower, and she makes it work. And I'm a huge fan of intelligent, bright protagonists who fight their reality and come out of it or navigate it. Not like, you can't come out of it, but who are not crying about it, or just losing hope. So for me, Anuja is a story of empowerment, and that's what drew me to it. And be like, let's put all the power behind, and that's what I really, really appreciate. Otherwise, I have read a lot of celebrating poverty. India is everything. India is literally everything, everywhere, all at once. We have all the riches and all the it's like and all the poverty. We are a huge nation put together, so it is a combination of that. So in this, something that Adam puts very beautifully is like, while these two men feel like they are have agenda around her and are controlling her future, but it's actually Anuja who has them waiting for her, and by the end of it, and just that lens was incredible, and it's the right amount of length, it's the right amount of music, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film, and it's my absolute honor to come on board, to watch it and come on board a couple of months ago, to be able to navigate to the next steps. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Our honor. Our honor, Guneet.
Very beautifully put, Guneet. And Adam, I think from what I have read up about your sort of background a little bit, is that you've always kind of been a part of stories which are very human interest ones, that are very, uh, that are very soulful, in its essence, but also at the same time, there's a sense of hope, I think, in all of them. And I think in Anuja, by the end of the film, sure, very subtly it addresses different societal topics, but at the same time there is that sense of, progression and a sense of ray of light and hope for her. I think for you as a filmmaker, I think similar to what I asked Guneet, really, how important for it was it for you to also, kind of detach yourself as an outsider looking in to the sort of milieu that you're focusing on, and actually really get to the bottom of things and understand the roots and the issues of why things exist and why they are in this position as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Can I just step back one second and kind of also address the first question as well? Just because it's really important for me to say as a filmmaker that that child labor was an issue that we wanted to use the film to highlight. We felt we could tell a story that's gripping, that's entertaining, that's inspiring, that moves people emotionally, but that also happens to be about a child who's engaged in child labor. And that that happens to be true of 1 in 10 children across the globe. So, hundreds of coming of age stories are made every year, and how many of them deal with child labor, right? How many deal with them with kids who are working? Statistically, 1 in 10 ought to, right? This is not, so I want to say that child labor is not an India problem. It's a global problem. It exists here in California, where I live now. But my wife is of Indian origin. Her family is of Indian origin, and she's a visual artist who's also my creative partner in filmmaking. And so this film was largely inspired by the themes of her practice. Her family was brought from Uttar Pradesh to Guyana by the British to work the sugar plantations as indentured laborers. And so we've often thought about her past and about other trajectories her family might have taken had they not been brought to Guyana. And our kids are profoundly aware of our families of that side of their family's past. And yeah, so that's part of what brings us there. I also have a background in South Asian studies. I've lived in India off and on for years, and spent 5 years of my life studying Sanskrit. So when I see your name, and I think,
Oh,
where'd the A go, right? But I think but going back to this, it's talking about filming, kids in this environment, and talking about it as a filmmaker who comes into that environment as someone who doesn't come from that experience. I think in some ways, whether we were born and raised in India or London or LA, we're all kind of to some extent outsiders. I mean, that is to say that none of us have, you could live, in Delhi, in a very posh corner of South Delhi, and never really have to encounter the existence of child laborers, right? I mean, this is kids who engage in who are forced to work, don't often have the resources to make movies about themselves.
mm,
I happen to be in a very privileged position to make a film, which is an incredible privilege.
yeah.
And my feeling is that when given that privilege, one ought to try to tell stories that are meaningful. Not every time. I don't mean to say every film has to be about some social issue. That's ridiculous. But in my own background, given my own experience and my wife's family history and my research interests, it just made sense to use the film to kind of shine a light on this issue. And um, the thing that was important and that kind of struck us almost immediately as soon as we started to meet the kids and work with nonprofit organizations in Delhi was that this isn't, there are 160 million kids globally engaged in child labor. There
Yeah.
are 160 million different stories that could be told. This is not the definitive story of child labor, right? I mean, there's there are a lot of wonderful, incredible moving stories that could be told about a kid in a similar circumstance. But it was important to us, it was obvious to us that these kids are not just passive victims, that they, just like kids across, in any walk of life, are teeming with imagination and with resilience and creativity and craftiness. And so, and I think partly because of the circumstances in which a lot of the kids that we met grew up, they're particularly resilient. They've had to find unique ways, creative ways of creating joy, finding some kind of magic in otherwise really harsh circumstances. So we wanted the film to honor that spirit that we discovered in these kids, and kids, quite frankly, like Sajda, our lead, who comes from a background of working the streets in Old Delhi.
Hmm. And I think what I really liked as well, I mean, from a technical perspective, and by the way, thank you so much for actually talking a bit about your background and your affiliation to sort of like the South Asian Indian culture, because, Adam, I've always said it, the lens really matters, and I think the perspective also matters because I'm so exhausted of seeing poverty porn glorified on such a global level. It's got to a point where I'm just like, okay, what's next? Ab aage kya? What? I mean, I'm sure there's other stories, and I think Anuj is a very hopeful film that I really genuinely enjoyed watching. And I think what I was about to say is that the use of your lighter colors in this, because I've seen a lot of rural stories of recent where they're very heavy in like the yellows and like the browns, just to kind of emphasize that whole village type look. Whereas I feel what you've done here is that you've employed a lot more brighter colors. It's a lot more welcoming to watch, even if it is obviously something that's very intense that's happening in their lives. So I guess for you, how sure were you not to actually follow that template style of filmmaking and template style of technical aspects, I think, when actually telling this story?
100%. Yeah. That Orientalist gaze where everything shot in India has to have this particular, glossy golden look. Oh, yeah, no, 100% conscious from the very moment we started working with Akash Rajay, our incredibly gifted cinematographer, and my assistant director, Shitesh Saini. We, from the very beginning, were like, okay, we're not going to do that. Like, we need to avoid that. We want to capture as best we could an the authentic materiality of the world in which the girls lived. But
Yeah.
from a creative standpoint, we also wanted to differentiate visually in terms of the light and the textures, the different worlds in which these kids navigate. Because, like what Guneet was saying a moment ago,
Yeah.
India is a multitude of things. It's an infinite. It's more. There's more life and more forms of life and more diversity in India than anywhere else in the globe, in my experience, right?
True.
And you can walk right from a juggy in Old Delhi into an upscale mall, which Anuja does, right? And in the blink of an eye, you go from one world to another. Um, so we wanted to use light to differentiate these spaces. The home where the girls live has some kind of warmth because that's their it's a very modest space, but it is the space that they share together. It's some could say it's bleak or grim, but it's warmth, and it represents something like a womb, a garbhagriha, you might say.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and the the factory is cold, is cool, it's blues. We visited about over a dozen, I think about a dozen factories,
That's great.
and in just both researching and looking for locations. And generally, there was this consistent sense that the lighting was quite cool in these spaces. So we wanted to have a contrast between those two spaces, and then again the mall, which is kind of sterile, and when you go from the marketplace, which is bustling with colors, into the mall, you have a shift. And so the idea of kind of navigating these different worlds that all exist right there in fairly close proximity in center in Old Delhi and well, we shot the slum scenes in Northeast Delhi, but that was what was important. It was both capturing the texture, the authentic feeling, not just some colonialist gaze, some like Europeans' conception of what India should look like, and then also differentiating the different spaces.
Very beautifully articulated, honestly. I'm absolutely loving the perspectives actually about this film because it really sets things into picture. Because when you watch a film, there's so many things that run by your mind, and I'm also really fascinated with the way you, like you said, I think you worked with some not-for-profit organizations as well. I forgot the name. I think it was based in Delhi itself, and I think Sajda and the other girl are also from that organization as well, right?
Not Ananya, not the girl who plays the older sister.
Right.
I've seen that on social media, but that's just that's it's easy. It's complicated story, so it's easy to get these things. Yeah, the Salam Balik Trust is the organization that we principally worked with. We worked with a bunch of them, but they were really instrumental in casting. They helped with pre-production. They helped even like with some locations and things. And we also hope to help them in return use the film as a vehicle to raise awareness and funds for the incredible work they do. Every day, 100 kids, roughly 100 kids arrive in Delhi every day with nothing but the shirt on their back, kids under 14, and they're there to find opportunity, to find work, to escape from something. Um, and they try to help those kids, and it's a growing challenge because it's these and but yeah, so sorry, I kind of lost the thread there.
Yeah, no, no, I was gonna actually say for you because obviously, essentially for Sajda, this is her life that you're bringing on screen, and it's very interesting because we had a film called Sing Sing recently this year, which again one of the actors who made their debuts actually is playing a younger self of them when they were incarcerated as well in that film, and I find it very fascinating when filmmakers cast actors who are essentially playing a version of themselves or themselves essentially on screen. So I know she's very young, and obviously for her, it's an opportunity to kind of express herself as well through the film medium. But for you as well, what were some of the briefs that you gave to her, and how did you kind of hone that talent in her, in terms of making sure it not just comes across as real, but also it kind of brings out a bit of a acting chop within her too.
Yeah, so first I have to say that she is just a raw natural talent, and she was already engaged in acting classes with a gentleman, very talented, wonderful gentleman by the name of Pankaj Gupta, who is also a graduate of the Salam Balik Trust. So he himself grew up in one of their residential homes, and now he teaches theater at one of the at those homes. And so he was working with Sazda already at the time, and he was the one telling me, you have to wait for her self tape. It's going to be amazing. My goal, I directed a child actor in only one other project. I'm a relative newcomer to film. I have to confess, the real pro here is Guneet, whose work is inspired my this project in some ways. Um, I my only the one lesson I learned from the first project is this is not just true for child actors. This can be true across the board, is that no one should be acting.
Mm,
Try to
true.
try not to have anyone acting. That's the best possible case scenario. So create conditions in which the kids can kind of play and can kind of express themselves and bring out whatever kind of naturally comes out. So we tried throughout the film to create um, almost like construct almost like games, like the scene where they're reading, where the older sister's teaching Anuja how to read. In that scene, Sajda is herself learning how to read. So we reconstructed that scene on the fly when it became evident that she was just learning to read for the first time because she hadn't been in formal education until just months before. We thought, well, why don't we structure it this way, where the sister is teaching the younger girl to read, and then that's an authentic moment that we captured. And of course, the ads that they're reading are real ads. I'm not going to write fake matrimonial ads. The real ones are too good. So we just gathered up I just gathered up the best ones I could find, and then put them, and we had them printed out on a newspaper. They weren't actually in the newspaper. They were printed on the newspaper, and then we had Sazda actually kind of reading this. So we tried to create situations where she was being her authentic self. When she's being chased, there's a chase scene. She's literally, you know, we didn't really have permission. So we thought
Oh,
we did, but it turned out we didn't. So she was literally being chased, and that added to the authenticity of that scene. Um, so in preparation for filming, we didn't have a lot of time. We only had a handful of days. I just made sure that I made sure that Ananya, the two sisters, the girls who play the two sisters, had a chance to bond and have fun together.
hmm.
So we played some games, you know. We didn't do any rehearsals. We didn't have them practice any lines or anything like that. We just had them play games and really cultivate that bond because as you know noted and as Guneet has noted numerous times, this is really a film about the relationship between two sisters.
Yeah, true.
That's the heart and soul. The thing about child labor, which gets foregrounded, it's important. That's a social message that can be taken away from watching the film.
Yeah.
But this film is a universal story about two incredibly industrious sisters and their love for one another and you know, and so cultivating that relationship and they took out they it just so happens the younger girl Sajda has an older sister with whom she was actually living on the streets. And Ananya has a younger brother. So they each have a sibling
Nice.
that kind of stood in for the other. And so emotionally, I think that they were both wonderfully prepared to play these roles.
It just literally worked out for you. It seems like the universe literally just paved the way for you. And I think
Clearly.
that's why I really could resonate and really like and appreciate the film because it felt very sincere. Because sometimes you watch a film and you can just tell that number one, this film has either just been made just to kind of get the clout at the award circuits, or number two, there's some other hidden agenda behind it. Whereas with Anuja, you can tell it's genuinely sincere at its core as a storyteller. I think that's why I could really appreciate that. And I think if there is someone who has really genuinely mastered that art and who I think is an exemplary talent in our industry is of course Guneet. Guneet, also I want to congratulate you also for Kill this year.
Okay.
Um, it was absolutely unreal sitting in Cineworld IMAX in Leicester Square with a bunch of non-Indian audiences watching Dharma Productions' logo play, first of all, and them watching a Hindi language action film, which was gory at its best, was an absolutely incredible experience. So that was really
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And of course, the spectrum of Kill and Anuja is of course very, very different. But as filmmakers, if we can, find honest stories and honest versions of stories to be told, I think I don't think anybody can ever make a film for the awards.
yeah,
You can just show up in your most honest form, retain that honesty every day because filmmaking is a long process, especially independent filmmaking, finding the money, if finding the people, uh, getting the permissions, all of that, everything. The edit, and then maybe stopping till you find more money to be able to hire and then do color and then try and submit to festivals and try and show up to those festivals, pay for the tickets and the whole works and manage so many people expectations with very, very little resources. So I think if you show up for all this over years, over a year or something, with all your honesty, that honesty shows on screen.
yeah.
That integrity shows on screen. You can feel it, you can smell it, you can, and that is something that is Anuja for me. And that's something that we'd like to, retain and, so it's awards happen, awards happen for, I feel, um, honest ventures. Yeah.
So what I was going to say, I think your whole spectrum of, like you said, of secure entertainment has been very interesting. I mean, from you going on to do Gangs of Wasseypur to then you doing Kathal recently as well. The spectrum is so vast, and I think you're also exemplary because the subjects of realism was once we affiliated with the parallel cinema movement, during the Smita Patil, Shaban Azmi, the rising of their days, to actually now seeing that actually, like an All We Imagine Is Light is now literally becoming headline news, which was something very unheard of many years ago, even Lapata Ladies for that matter. Whereas you have really been a mainstream sort of bridge, a bridge between the mainstream commercial side as well as these other social realistic sort of cinema, which otherwise people would be very kind of skeptical to touch on. So I think for you, how important has that battle of that middle ground ethos been for you in terms of the work that you greenlight at Sikya Entertainment as well? And I want to talk to you a bit about the short film format as well. That's actually becoming very popular in India, but I'll come to that after your response.
Um, I think we move forward with something that touches our heart. So we work on the whole spectrum because we are producers, and why not? And I actually kind of find joy in when people put me in a box and I get to jump right out of it, because why not? You know, in life there are no rules. These are all, things put on you and come on you through generations and through, just there are no rules. You make your own rules. So for me as a producer, whatever I like, I do, because, there's a very simple answer to that, because I can.
True.
And yeah, and no, but I created this space, I don't come from a place where I can say this, but there's a little story to this. I met somebody. I was in a very difficult spot on one of my films called Tigers,
Mm.
um,
Wow.
and finishing that film. I met somebody who was like the head of Technicolor, and we needed to in LA, and we needed to finish the film, and the finances were tough and everything, and she saw the film and she said, "Yeah, we'll do the color, we'll do all your deliverables. You can take it to the festival. You can tell your." I was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Wait, we don't have any." She's like, "I don't. You don't need to worry about that. We'll just do it. You've made a good film." And I was like, "Why?" And she said, "Because I can." And that day, I was like, when I am in position of power, whenever in life,
Mm.
you know, when the sun is shining even brighter for me, and I've created that position of power through my work, I will back something because I can, with my time, with all my resources, and all my intelligence and insights, with all my experiences to come on the table with that. So Anuja for me is that, because I can, and in fact it's secure. So we're very vast. Our upcoming slate is a thriller with a family thriller with a backdrop of Me Too. So stuff people don't go to, but we love the story and we worked very hard on it. So um it's stuff that touches your heart. It's stuff, and it's so intuitional on what draws you. There's no math, there's no clear 1 2 3 step, but it is just stuff that, we will be, as a whole team at Sikya, excited to show up every day for a couple of years and see the end of it and take it to the, highest spot in the world, and open the world for that piece of content. And something, and I actually pitch a lot of my films to people, and all the time I'm pitching, and
Yeah.
I'm always testing, so you have to be in love with it. So that's the process. It's a process of falling in love every time all over again.
I'm so glad you said this actually, because I was going to ask about the short film format, which I will in a bit, but I think marketing has become of paramount importance more than ever. And if there's anything to go by, I noticed that I think when RRR was having its campaign going as well at the Oscars, and I think obviously Guneet at that time for Elephant Whisperers as well. I feel like it's so tough. It's so tough. When you've got a piece of cinema which is short, when you've got a topic as well, which might be a bit distinct to what is more palatable to commercial audiences, it must be a rather big challenge to market that and to get people to really appreciate that aspect of the film rather than it just being an Oscar entrant or an Academy Award shortlisted venture. So, Guneet, what are the big challenges do you think in terms of the marketing side, especially of products like Anuja, especially in today's climate where everything is what you see on social media as well?
Actually, independent filmmaking is not easy.
Mm.
From challenges start from fundraising to, getting the right crew to making for making this film everyone's priority for that point of time, because people are always negotiating time, and people are always, trying to do 10 things, and it's the world of freelancers. So Independent filmmaking is not easy, either a short or a feature or a documentary. It takes time. It takes, the right kind of people to come together and then to nurture it and then to protect it, then to nurture the vision, to finish it, to do your post, to do the festivals, and then to find distribution, and to find the right kind of people who can champion it, who can come on board as executive producers, as producers. So Anuja is on that journey. So it's, more power to Adam, Suchita, and the whole team who have done all those things and finished the film, taken it to festival, won awards, and hustled their way with their means, and with support of a non-profit, with support of so many incredible people who put in their time, and now with Mindy and me being on board, and as we go on this journey, we hope to also find distribution, bring it to a larger audiences, and it's a journey, and there is nothing right or wrong, and there's never the same, uh, but you have to shine the brightest in the world today to find distribution. And
Hmm.
Anuja,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, very rightly said. So now I think what's happened is that I feel I think just during the pandemic or just before the pandemic, I think even before the massive OTT boom that happened in India, I feel like short stories, short films really found its traction. I think for me, I mean, Guneet, you might be able to maybe, add to this as well, perhaps better. But I remember watching Shefali Shah's Juice on YouTube. I saw that film, and then during the pandemic, a big actress, a big star like Kajol did a film like Devi. So these were like, mainstream commercial actors who were like sort of supporting and working on platforms like the short film platforms at that point in time, which again were almost unheard of, and I think it's really wonderful to see how it's kind of grown exponentially. But Guneet, what do you think has really contributed towards the popularity, I think, in short films and its sort of culture, I think, in India? Because I mean, having something like a film on YouTube is great, but having a short film on a competitive platform like Netflix, like with Elephant Whisperers, for example, is a very, very remarkable thing. So, what do you think has contributed towards this interest?
I think digital platforms coming globally, spreading globally, and their need for content and strategy. So we actually made seven very large short films, like well done short films for what is now Amazon Mini MX Player. But at that point of time, it was Amazon Mini, and they needed to be able to test out and see different kinds of material. There was in between Flipkart starting to make short films. We did a bunch of short films for them. And in YouTube, it's usually brand led, or it's surrogate branding that allows that channel and to get that out there. So everybody has a strategy, as a from a platform point of view, what their need is. But this, where Anuja was actually idea first, was a mission, is a mission, is something that, you put your life and work and years of work into it, and then hope that you'll find more people and more teams, and not originate from the platform, but originate from a filmmaker and then go all the way to the highest platform, or to get out there. So it's always a it's always each film is different. Period End of Sentence, for example, was acquired by Netflix, and Elephant Whisperers was from when we came on board, the cold email. So Elephant Whisperers was a cold submission, was an email sent to me by Kartiki, the filmmaker, and to me and to Netflix, to us at Sekia and to Netflix. And we kind of jointly responded individually and then touched base. And they were like, okay, if you're coming on board, let's do it. And so Netflix came on board very, very early, came on board with us. And that is a Netflix IP. And then they went on to support the whole promotion, the marketing, and the campaign. So we had distribution when we entered. Whereas Period End of Sentence, we found distribution uh, during the race of from shortlist to nomination to that. Period End of Sentence had the different journey. So each film, has a different journey. And I think there's a lot of producing craft. which is needed. There's a lot of understanding of what budget, how to fundraise. I tell everybody who's a first time filmmaker, firstly, please, uh, pick up a camera and shoot. That's number one. That's exactly what Kartiki did. So, and second thing is that find your tribe, double down on your tribe, and one day at a time, one step at a time. You will, there will be a whole support system that will come along and move forward. And you'll also learn a lot in the process. So there's no right answer to this. But what led to an increase of short films which are pre-funded, which are not originating from a filmmaker, or which are not crowd-funded, but like a first-time filmmaker putting together a short film should crowdfund, must crowdfund. So you de-risk yourself. So you de-risk as much as you can, in because distribution is so hard. But sometimes when a platform needs it or a brand needs it that has a YouTube front and a huge following, they do fund short films. So yeah.
Right. Oh wow. I love my job sometimes because when I hear answers like this, I'm like, I actually just got a bit of a masterclass from Guneet Monga Kapoor here. So this is really wonderful. But no, but thank you so much, Guneet. I think those are some very valuable insights, I think, into the current space of independent filmmaking. Adam, I think for you, because like you mentioned, you're a relatively fresh filmmaker. You're still quite new on the scene. And I think, people actually often from my dinner table conversations with friends and family and other even industry friends as well, that short films seem that I feel they used to not get that much importance before. People used to kind of dismiss it and brush it off. Oh, it's a short film. How hard can it be? But actually, I feel it's probably one of the toughest forms of storytelling because you've got to show a very beautiful arc of a story, and that too, that is very compelling in a very short, limited time. So I guess what were some of the challenges for you in telling this story like the way you have, but as you mentioned as well in your previous responses, which is as compelling, which is as engaging, but yet also uh highlights subtle things that are important for the story as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I probably I probably ignored all the really sound advice in making Anuja because the general story that wise people are told and sage, is this sage advice is, if you're making your first or your second short film, try to film something that's contained, write a script that can be shot in one room, location that you have easy, free, cheap access to, that sort of thing. And in writing Anuja, I threw all of that wisdom and and prudence to the wind and just, and just worked out the story and let it unfold the way that, in fact, I was like dreaming up locations based on, I hadn't actually been back. I hadn't been in Delhi. Um, in over a decade, but I was remembering like places that we could shoot, and not knowing whether they'd still exist. And but I was just, dreaming of like, oh well, we should have, like at this point in the scene in the film, we should in the story that Anuja has to be walking along this path, and and so I didn't take into consideration any of the physical and financial limitations that we eventually did face in making the film, and that caused everybody a great deal of anxiety and because we were shooting all over Delhi, and even, I mean, in other, it wasn't just in Delhi, it was in, some of the uh, other areas around Delhi. And as getting from getting from one area to another during the middle of the day can take 3 hours, right? And so we had a 5-day shoot. Um, to film what was it? I think a 33-page screenplay at the time, which made no sense at all.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and because we were working with child actors, we were limited, severely limited in terms of how many hours we could shoot each day. So we had to figure out ways to shoot things like all the B-roll when the kids were back at the hotel, or doing their, like, their set school or whatever. And so basically, what I want to say is that this is an example of a filmmaker not taking any of the good advice and just and making it hard on himself and ourselves, everybody who was involved. But But I think, I vow the next if I make another short film, and I'd like to make a feature next, but if I do make another short film, I will take the advice of, I'll try to come up with a contained story so that we could shoot it in 2 days with zero, but because this was we didn't have any big financial backers. We kind of crowdfunded the film basically from family and friends and people who were interested in the subject matter, but we didn't have any studio backing or anything like that. So uh, and that's how every short filmmaker is ever is going to operate. This does not make you Anuja unique. I'm sure even in this category of films that are Oscar shortlisted, I'm sure a lot of us were doing the same thing, basically just self-funding a little project. But um, one thing I will say is that I think the bias against short film goes back to an age when films were watched either on television or ideally in a theater. And if you're television, you have to fill an hour spot, and if you're a theater, you no one's going to buy a ticket for a 20-minute film. But now, we live in an era where, for better or worse, probably largely for worse, most films are watched on computer screens and in homes, and sometimes it makes me cry to say it, but sometimes on iPhones even. I've sent our film to people, and Vimeo. By the way, this is a little I shouldn't I don't divulge. Vimeo will tell you what kind of device this film has been screened on. So I know which of my friends have watched Anuja on their iPhones, and they're no longer my friends. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. But it is heartbreaking to know that your film, which is shot, an anamorphic, widescreen, is being, with subtitles, with little subtitles, is being watched on a phone. Um, Anyways, I just feel like there is potential for this space, for this particular format. I think of the short film, it's just a different format. Storytelling has to, you really do have to be careful as a storyteller. You can't, you have to, you have to be efficient in your storytelling. You have to kind of pace things right. And uh, I know I had an early director's cut of Anuja that was significantly longer. And I think if I had a feature film of Anuja, I would definitely prefer the pacing of that director's cut. That is really a rough cut. Um, but but yeah, there's definitely an art to short films are like short stories, right? I mean, they're just fundamentally different than a novel. Um, yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, very wonderful. But I think on a final note, before we wrap up, Guneet, where will Anuja be available for people to watch, actually? Have you secured like a platform for it?
So we're in the process. There is a lot of interest. We are in conversation. It is right now on Vimeo,
Mm.
and it is an independent film on its journey that is being discovered by the world. There's a lot of conversation around it, and it'll find its home soon.
Right. And a two-part question before I finally wrap things up. And Adam, I think I've got a question for you as well, very quickly I need to ask. Right, number one, first part of the question is Guneet, 2024 has been literally the year of women in the independent space of cinema. 2022 in film was a massive reset of like mainstream sort of traction that was happening. But here it's more rooted stories that are very women coming into play at the forefront. And I think that's really heartening to see. I think for you not to make it about gender politics, but I think it warrants it because it is such a, like you said, because you can. It's a very big statement to make, especially in an industry like this, which is still very male dominated.
Yeah.
So, number one, how proud do you feel with the way that number one, this whole movement of women in cinema is has really come to play, especially this year in Indian cinema? And secondly, let's just say hypothetically, Anuja won at the Oscars. Let's manifest that. What would be, what would you want people to see from this milestone achievement, besides it being a myopic achievement? What would you hope people to take away from this film's success?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's been a very good year with Lapata Ladies, with Santosh, with All We Imagine Is Light. Um, it's amazing to see women directors. I mean, less than 4% Indian women are directors. Less than 4% directors in India in cinema are women. So it's time to change that and to definitely double down or 10x down. It's definitely time to change that. So it's amazing. More women making films. It's the need of the hour. Definitely. I'm also in the process of setting up Women in Film India chapter uh,
Wow.
with the Women in Film LA chapter. So there's a lot of conversation because, going back to the same thing that once you're in, when doors are opening up and people are listening to you, what is it that you take through those doors? So definitely want to have gender conversations at scale in the rooms that open for me at this point of time. Um, and if, not if, once Anuja wins,
Once. Once.
once Anuja wins, I think it's a win of independent cinema. It's a win of hope and of putting your heart out there on something that you truly, truly believe in. So both Adam and Suchita's journey of looking at this years of their research, their work, their family's work, um, is highlighting and putting a conversation out there in their capacity, self-funded, as a short. It's a huge win for independent filmmaking,
Hmm.
and it's a huge win for people who can dream, who want to do something and use their power, which is soft power, to make this world a little bit more empathetic, and have and use all that power to uplift the people working on ground, because there is a lot. We were able to do tiny bit of that with period end of sentence. We were able to do our bit, and here we are, with that spotlight. There comes a lot of love, a lot of responsibility,
Hmm.
and with all of us behind it and the team, I know the heart, the intentions, and the work to be done forward.
Hmm. Well, wonderful. I think going forward, Adam, you mentioned it as well. If you were to do a film, feature film, the techniques you'd adapt. But what subject would you like to pick up on if you get a chance in your next upcoming projects as well?
Oh gosh, good question. By the way, can I make a real quick shout out to Girls Will Be Girls? I mean, India is producing so many fabulous films. By the way, I
Yes,
think
girls will be
Guneet
good.
is, yeah, women, female director, female stories about women that are not that aren't confined to kind of traditional conceptions of femininity or whatever. Really powerful stuff, and it's remarkable to see. These are also films that are going to be um, incredibly successful outside of India. You know, they transcend culturally, and this is I think following the footsteps of like films that Guneet has made, like The Lunchbox and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
um, it's like Indian cinema. You hear me roar. There was a moment a few years ago where Korean cinema was being kind of I don't want to say discovered because film lovers in America know all about Korean, but it was kind of popularized in a way. And I think Indian cinema is having that moment now
Very
on a
true.
global scale, and I love that because there's just so much incredible talent. Um, two stories. I have a kind of a feature version of Anuja that's not just an expansion of Anuja's own story, but it's actually kind of an international thriller where Anuja's character is actually wrapped up in some. It's kind of complicated. It has to do with other issues associated with. I'll just give a little hint: electronic waste. So I don't know if you do any research on electronic waste, you'll discover that electronic waste gets shipped all around the world, and yeah. So I don't want to give too much away, but there I have a screenplay that I'm developing on in that space. So kind of an expansion of Anuja, but in a different direction tonally, something more like a Syriana, if or
Oh,
Inarritu's Babel, something like that. And then I also just love the relationship between siblings and parents and children. I mean, just that kind of, that I don't have any scripts that are like straight romances or anything like that, but I have a lot of ideas about stories about families. So I have a story about a father who's going in search of his estranged daughter
Mm.
that I'm developing. That's loosely based on a true story of a high school friend of mine. And yeah, so those are the kinds of films that I want to make. They're kind of humanist dramas that that explore human relationships, and if there's a way of connecting those human relationships to broader themes that make us think critically about the world and have the potential for some change, then that's where I want to go as a filmmaker.
Amazing, amazing. Well, on that note, Adam and Guneet, thank you so much for joining me on Filme Shilmy. It's been such a pleasure to have you both together and to really celebrate the success and the massive breakthrough that Anuja has had. And would like to congratulate the entire team, including Mindy as well, and wishing all the very best and manifesting the best for Anuja. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Anuj. And
Thank you, Anuj. Thank you,
yeah,
Filmy Show Me.
and Adam, send me that screenplay.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Guneet. See
All
you
right.
Bye.
guys.
Catch you
Thanks.
later. Bye.
Bye. See
Bye-bye.
you.